Welcome, Jack.
Mute. It, I'm zooming in from the Sierras near Lake Tahoe in Truckee, where I'm visiting my 6-year-old grandson Desmond and his parents. And Trudy and I are up here in the snow. And it's been wonderful and tiring. 6-year-olds have a lot of energy. Come on, Baba, let's do this and that and this and that. Anyway, it's been great. And now I'm happy to see you all. And if this is your first time coming, our Monday night class has been ongoing for 39 years. 30 of them or more on the land at Spirit Rock, before that nearby. And the format is really simple. It invites you, whoever you are, to come together and for us to sit in meditation with a little bit of guidance to start for 20 or 30 minutes. And then we take a break, 5-10 minutes to stretch or relax. And that's usually followed by a talk or teachings, and sometimes with dialogue. Tonight will be a little bit different. There'll be a semi-talk and maybe a lot more dialogue. We'll try that. And let me pause before we meditate. Sometimes people think meditation is an invitation or an approach to have a particular experience or state, even that very basic one of quieting the very busy mind or calming in the midst of anxiety or planning or worry or things like that, and then getting some deeper understanding. And all those things can happen. But the real point is to come into the reality of the present. This is all we have, actually, this moment. The past is a fiction. The future is a fantasy, memory and fantasy. What's alive is just now. And to come into this present moment with mindful, loving awareness, to notice the play of our human experience, and to discover that we can take our seat with a compassionate and gracious heart, with a freedom that is your birthright and mine, in the midst of all the coming and going of feelings and thoughts and memories and plans and emotions. We take our seat, sometimes beginning quietly with the breath, inviting a sense of calm and ease, and noticing the play of experience. And we become the mindful, loving witness, the mindful, loving awareness itself, spacious and gracious. So with that, I invite you to find a way to sit that's comfortable, at ease. Let your body rest. And if you're comfortable doing so, when you're ready, allow your eyes to close gently. And begin by taking 2 long breaths. And settle yourself here in the present moment. Let your body relax. Let your eyes and face be soft. Loosen the jaw. Maybe roll your head in a little circle to release your neck. Let it find a simple upright. Let the shoulders relax and the arms and hands be easy. Feel the whole weight of your body and how it is met by the seat in the earth below. Relax and just settle into your seat. Let yourself be fully supported, at ease just where you are. Let the belly be soft and the breath natural. Let the heart be soft as well, to receive whatever arises with compassion and kindness. Now, with this embodied presence, begin to notice the experience of this present moment with loving awareness. For those of you who are experienced somewhat in meditation, you might want to begin by simply sensing how the body breathes itself. Feel it as coolness in the nose, swirling, tingling in the back of the throat, or the rise and fall of chest or belly, the whole body. And it breathes all by itself. And as you feel it, invite a sense of calm, ease with each breath. Calm and ease, relaxing with each breath. And this breathing with mindful, loving awareness is not avoiding the world. There's turmoil and difficulty and problems and suffering and concerns we all share. This is a centering of yourself, a quieting of the mind, a softening of the heart, so you can be fully present before you respond to this world, before you respond wisely with courage and compassion. First, be here. This breath, steady, easy. And as you feel the breath, when the attention drifts off, just bring it back gently. Relax into this breath just now. Feel it, rest in it, swim in it. And let all the other thoughts and worries and plans and sensations rise and fall like waves of the ocean around the breath. And you feel the ocean wave of the breath, calm and steady. This breath, breathing its own rhythm, and you rest in the reality of the present as the breath arises And now, as you settle, come to an ease, centered, invite the sense of mindful, loving awareness to open so that you can notice the waves that rise and fall around the breath. Feeling the breath, and then all of a sudden the attention is pulled by a thought, remembering something, imagining, planning, thinking, picturing. And when it happens, as soon as you're aware of it, not right away often, but when you are, you can acknowledge it as if with a little bow. Oh, remembering, thinking. You are the loving awareness that notices that wave arising of thoughts. And then return back to feel the breath in the middle. And just as the mindful, loving awareness can notice the thoughts and words and images, it can also notice the emotions, sadness, excitement, fear, love, longing, desire, frustration. And when they arise, as if with a bow, you can acknowledge, oh, sadness, oh, excitement, oh, longing, oh, joy. And let that wave of emotion be felt and rise for a time like a wave and pass away. And then back to the few breaths again. Just here, the reality of the present, this breath or the waves around it. And notice now, too, that just as you can be aware of the breath with loving awareness, just as you can notice the rising of thoughts and images, of emotions or sensations in the body, these waves that come and go around the breath. You are not the breath. You are not the thoughts and feelings and sensations. They all come and go. You are the consciousness, the space of awareness, of loving awareness that notices the breath and the experiences. Rest in the space of loving awareness, of consciousness itself. Relax, open, timeless, present, spacious. The breath comes and goes. Waves of experiences arise for a time and pass. And you are the loving witness, the awareness itself. Loving awareness is vast and open. It allows for all things. The joys and the sorrows arise and pass. The longing and love, all of it. And here you are, seated like the Buddha, herself, himself, the compassionate and loving witness. Spacious, at peace. Rest in the present. Relax. You are the consciousness. You are the awareness itself. And finally, let this loving awareness be filled with tenderness and compassion. It is love itself for all that arises, all the beauty and the pain, And you rest in the great heart of compassion and the vast consciousness of the awakened heart and mind. And when you're ready, allowing the sense of spacious, loving awareness to continue, let your eyes open gently and feel yourself centered in eternity, which you are, the reality of the present, where all things arise and pass. Look around, let the sights in with a gracious heart. Now, before we take our break, which we will in just a minute or two to stretch or relax, a reminder. The word mindfulness means sati sampajanya in Pali or Sanskrit, has two parts. It means mindful presence and mindful response. And see, we're mostly practicing in this sitting mindful presence. As you heard, they say in Zen, there are only two things: you sit and you sweep the garden. And it doesn't matter how big the garden is, the garden of the world. Breathing in, breathing out, we sit first. And I remember teaching at UCLA with Thich Nhat Hanh, a very big conference on Eastern Western psychology, a couple or a few thousand people. And it was time for walking meditation. And this particular weekend or few days of retreat, the US had commenced bombing somewhere. I forget where, but we're always bombing somebody somewhere. Sad to say. That's part of what we do in this world. And I was wearing a black armband, as were a number of people who came as a kind of protest, reminding people that we didn't stand up for bombing, that wasn't what we wanted. And I said to Thich Nhat Hanh, well, we could give black armbands to the other 1,000 people who don't have them when we go out and do our walking meditation across the UCLA campus. And he paused and looked at me and he said, no. He said, when you walk, just walk. Let your body, your steps, your walking be the peace you want for this earth. It was a beautiful moment. When you walk, just walk. Be that. And again, you sit or quiet yourself or even walk slowly. And then you sweep the garden. But I have to say, to use Ram Dass's phrase, boy, oh boy, he used to say, it sure feels good to sit together with you in these times. So thank you. Let's take a 5-minute stretch break and then we'll carry on from there. So we'll take one more minute, let people come back and get settled. Thank you. Welcome back. Before I start to talk this evening, because often I'll create a kind of crafted talk of teachings and examples and stories in a systematic way, and then we have a conversation afterward. For tonight, I want to do something different, and I'd like to be able to speak, but also to respond to where you are, to what are your concerns, or what are the themes you wish we could touch on. Maybe we'll also have some dialogue with this. So I invite you, let's open the chat, to put into the chat the themes or topics or words of what you're looking for, hope, or what's going on for you that we might talk about together. Thank you, Julian. Let's see what comes up. How to cope with the stress and anxiety of the current administration or the destruction in the country, balancing self-care with compassionate action, stability of heart, uncertainty, grief, fear of sickness, maintaining sanity while watching destruction, balancing doom scrolling with head in the sand, being overwhelmed, self-care versus activism, how to send love and blessings to all people, compassion with boundaries, how do I focus on the positive and stay present, giving my gifts, watching late stage capitalism disregard humans, the despair of the news, how to help those with memory issues to remember how to meditate, how to understand that there are other views of what's going on. Remember that spring always follows winter. How to not feel guilty for feeling safe. Overwhelmed. Okay, this was going to be a couple hours, but I'm afraid we'll be here all night. Might as well relax. But what I love about hearing from you, even though it's difficult, is somehow the sense that we're in this together. How do I stay centered? How do I take care of my family? How do I quiet myself and also act for the in the world? And how to do so with a joyful heart? How do I deal with the struggles? You know, how to avoid or work with feeling overwhelmed. And if you look at the screen and see the little faces in the squares, or you're on the, you know, Facebook live stream or whatever, we're in this together. And it doesn't mean there aren't some conservatives on the screen. And there are some really important conservative values. the best of them that we need. So this isn't a political statement, but it's a Dharma statement. As Thich Nhat Hanh again repeated often when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person remained centered and calm, it showed the way for everyone to survive. And you know who that one person is. And that's how the world is made. It's made from us, from our hearts and our being. And so maybe the first thing is just that we allow ourselves time to be present, to walk in nature, to turn off the damn news. You know, you kind of know the plot. It's like reading a Shakespearean tragedy in many cases, but you know it. And quiet your mind, tend your heart. And also, as you do, in some way, perhaps not get into the game of blame of who's right and wrong. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Russian activist and author, he said, if only it were so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessarily simply to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who among us is willing to destroy a piece of our heart? So in a way, what we're seeing, kind of concerns some people put in the chat, is really a symptom of our humanity. Here we are, 21st century, late stage capitalism, which has gotten to the place where there's further extremes of rich and poor or exploitation. And we're at the time what Joanna Macy calls the great turning, kind of the great opportunity, really, for us to reset our lives as human beings. Now, what's also true about the great turning is that it's a birth process. I don't know how many of you have given birth, but I imagine looking at the screen that some of you would raise your hands. And it's messy. It's painful. It's dangerous. It's difficult. And we are in some kind of a birth process. And all the things that we see are not just these are terrible things, but they're also symptoms of our fear as human beings. We're kind of wired to fear the other. And our politics is all about fear. The great commentators about politics, you know, the whole aim of politics is to frighten the populace into voting for you. That was 100 years ago, that commentary. But that's not who we are at heart. That's the small, separate self, the body of fear. But the Buddhist texts also begin, O nobly born, remember who you are. Remember your fearlessness in the midst of it all. Center yourself. Thomas Jefferson said something like, one person with courage is a majority. And I used to have on my refrigerator a picture of that Chinese man with the shopping bag standing in front of that line of tanks. Remember that image? Maybe after Tiananmen Square, and the tanks stopped and he had his shopping bags. But how do we do this? We have to stay in the present, because if you let yourself get drowned by the news and the fears and the thoughts, you'll go swimming and rising and falling in the ocean of grief and fear. And that's not who you are. Meditation invites you to have a very different perspective. You know, when a butterfly makes a chrysalis, we used to think as kids, and we were told this, that it would grow its wings, right? There's the caterpillar, and that it adds some wings and it comes out and it flies. But now we know, all the science shows us, it's something very different. It dissolves. It becomes a gelatinous mass of cells, some of which are related to the old butterfly, to the old caterpillar, and some other cells which have a beautiful name. They're called imaginal cells. And these are the cells that picture that they can fly. What a wild thing for those cells to believe that. But honestly, they do. They carry that image, that imagination, that possibility. And apparently there's some struggle there in the chrysalis about who's going to win out. Can we go back to the old caterpillar? I don't think so. And gradually the imaginal cells begin to build the wings of the butterfly. But it's not easy. Things fall apart. And I say that lightly, but actually there can be tremendous suffering. And we can see it. Part of our practice and our training is the capacity to bear witness to the ocean of tears, as well as the wondrous glory of the world and the universe. The beauty that surrounds us. And nature keeps showing us amazing things. And it keeps getting reborn no matter what you do. It will reborn. It will push through the cracks in the sidewalk. You try to pave it over, baby, it's coming back. It's just what it does. It renews itself. So there's a kind of trust that's asked. And there's a story. Remember Black Elk? Black Elk was the great medicine man of his people. And he was, celebrated. And he had this beautiful vision on Harney Peak about the circle of life. And part of the vision was the way the native people would again, his people would again come together and live in the harmony they had before. And in the beautiful biography of Black Elk Speaks, William Neihardt, who interviewed him and lived with him at the end of his life and became partly his voice, he was with Black Elk. And Black Elk was an old man now at the end of his life, as Neihardt writes. And he wanted to go back and visit the top of Harney Peak, where he was blessed by a vision of the sacred hoop of the world that inspired his whole life and so many people. And so he put on his finest headdress and painted himself as one does to meet the gods, and took a sacred pipe and asked for a blessing, honoring the goodness and beauty of the sacred tree. And he walked up the top of Harney Peak. And Neihardt said it was a clear blue sky. And yet Black Elk had told him that, in fact, if his life was any value, the rains would come. This is a very dry part of the Dakotas. But the clouds would part and bring some rain as a blessing from the Great Spirit. And he climbed up. The sky was perfectly clear. And there were tourists looking at this old man and his headdress and paint like wondering. And it was in the midst of a season of drought, one of the worst in years. And he lay himself on the ground at the top of Harney Peak and made a prayer that if he had lived righteously, that the gods would somehow bless him with rain. And Neihart said to his astonishment, some clouds appeared just over that part of the mountain, and a light rain began to fall. And Blackout lay there and smiled and somehow knew, even though he didn't succeed in reweaving the sacred hoop in the way that he intended, that his life was not in vain. There are some bigger forces than what you know, bigger than politics, bigger than even climate change, bigger than AI. And these are all huge forces. Don't get me wrong. But in another way, they're trivial. They're trivial compared to the forces of the turning of the seasons and the return of life. As Pablo Neruda says, you can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. There's another force. And that's what we're asked to remember, something mysterious and great, and to quiet ourselves and align ourselves. And then, of course, to begin to act, but to act not in the way of fear. You know, I tell that story, I might have told it a month ago, of our colleague, my beloved friend, Wes Nisker, who died a couple of years ago, visiting Gary Snyder, the great environmentalist now in his 90s, who got the Pulitzer Prize for his environmental writing 50, 60 years ago, Earth Household, saying, Gary, the oceans are rising, the deserts are growing, refugees everywhere, animals going extinct, the ice flows melting. What advice do you have? You've been an environmentalist for more than half a century. And he looked back and he said, don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. If you want to save it, don't save it out of guilt. Don't save it out of fear. Don't save it out of anger. Because the guilt and the fear and the anger are what has created our human problems. This is the source of it. If you want to save it because you love it. That's the force that makes a difference. You know, that's the power that does so. So what you do when you meditate is you let yourself sit with heartbreak. How many have heartbreak? Don't bother raising your hands. We know you. How many have felt guilt or fear? Okay. And then here's Gary saying, don't save it out of fear, out of confusion and guilt, doom scrolling, all these things which will come in these times. But the end of Mary Oliver's poem about the last day of the Buddha, where he lies under the two sal trees, and his last words as the trees break into blossom, and he looks up and he says, make of yourself a light. It's usually carried like be a lamp unto yourself, but Mary Oliver's better than that. She says, make of yourself a light. So I'm going to pause for a moment. We could get practical in a few minutes. But I'm really talking about the value of learning how to embody that nobility and dignity that is who you are. And we human beings go through horrible times and world wars and tremendous human caused suffering. How will you carry yourself? And what light will you carry? Because you can, you know. Let's open the chat again for comments for a moment. See what comes. Maybe we'll even have a little conversation. How are you doing? What is it that's here to say if there are words in the chat? Or maybe you're just quiet. I go to nature to relieve the grief, do it out of love. Such a powerful message because it's a shared message. We see each other. We're actually holding hands in spirit, even here. And you know why you get afraid? Do you know why you get angry and upset? Do you know why? Because you care. Underneath all that, the fear and the anger and all of that, it comes because you care. And in meditation, the invitation is to drop beneath. You can see the anger and the fear and all that. That's being human. Like Solzhenitsyn said, who doesn't have that in their heart? But underneath that, for you, is to sense that care. Poetry helps, arts help, from our friends on Facebook. A bigger picture. I feel like I should be doing something and make a difference, but what? Do it out of love breaks my heart open. Music helps. You know, a couple of days ago, being up in Truckee, there was a big demonstration of people out on the street who were concerned about the firing of the USAID and the money that would go to feed children who are hungry or starving, would go to give medicine to those who are sick. And the thing that struck me, Truckee's a small town, I think 4,000 people. Hundreds of people came out. And there were so many creative signs. It was amazing, the creativity. And that day, it was a couple of days ago, so many people came out for a long time. It took about a day to organize. And it was done by a high school student. He said, we got to get out there. And he started calling the other students, and they all started calling their friends and their parents and their cousins. And in a day or so, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds in the small town appeared with their signs of love and their signs of concern. You know, of course, there are signs of frustration and anger. There were all of them. I mean, part of it is it's so creative, actually, when when you're standing up. It's here. It's in us. And you say, well, what should I do? Go out in nature, supported by children and grandchildren. Yeah, they're rooting for you. And sometimes it's just small things. But I think about in Italy, you know, during the pandemic, people began to sing to one another from the balconies when they couldn't visit each other. And then they began to bang their pots. Remember that? It's really simple. We should have a pot banging day for people who are concerned. It also helps to have a big picture. If we think about the Great Turning, I remember being on the top of Mount Tamalpais. I've talked about this before. Some years ago, and Mount Tam is the 2,500-foot mountain in the middle of Marin County. So it's our local mountain. And it was a day of the passage of the planet Venus across the face of the sun. And so I drove up because I read about it. And at the top, there were a bunch of amateur astronomers who brought their telescopes, some with pretty big telescopes. And so I got to look in the big telescope, and there was the sun. And if you get to look close at it, first of all, it's kind of wiggly. It's not like bright orange disk. It's like looking into a fiery, moving, amazing thing all the time. It was astonishing to see how alive this being, the sun, is considered a being or a god in all these indigenous cultures. They could be right. This thing was really alive in these ways. And then at one corner, there was this little dark marble, very tiny compared to the big disk of the sun. And then as I watched for 5 minutes, I could see that it moved a tiny bit. I went away and it came back and it moved a little further. And then I looked and I said, oh, that's Venus. It's about the same size as planet Earth, like us, the same size. And it's wending its way around our great star like we do. And there's this vast space, and it's traveling around like our planet does. I could feel us. There's this huge solar system space and these little tiny marbles going around our star in this wonderful way. And then we get upset. Sometimes I go about pitying myself, said the Ojibwe, when all the while I'm being carried by great winds across the sky. And so there's something about trusting Black Elk vision that there's something bigger. And then you're called in the darkest times and the most difficult times to remember who you are and to treat one another from that place of dignity and respect, how nobly born. In a way, that's what we've been practicing for, some of us for a very long time. And it doesn't take a lot. Gestures of kindness, asking others how you can help, and then tuning and listening. Who is doing things that make a difference? Is there a new underground railroad that's growing to shelter people who otherwise might be in danger? Would you want to be a stop on that underground railroad if that was the right thing for you? Yeah. We will get through this, and we'll get through it because we do it together. There's an amazing book called Bury the Chains by Adam Hochschild. And it's the story primarily of a man named Thomas Clarkson. And Thomas Clarkson aligned himself. He might have been a Quaker, or he aligned himself with the Quakers. And he was one of the activists in England that was fighting against the slave trade. And in the 1700s, in the 1800s, a lot of the wealth of the British Empire came from slaving, and then from slave plantations, if you call them that, slave colonies, penal colonies, especially in the Caribbean islands and Central America and all those places where you can grow sugarcane, because sugarcane was the oil of the time and it brought great wealth. And they knew, the Quakers especially knew that this was immoral and it was wrong. And 6 of them got together in a English tea house and said, we're going to change this. And they all vowed in their own way to make a difference. And Clarkson in some way became the head of them. And he rode for 30 years. He rode tens of thousands of miles back and forth across England, meeting especially with the English gentry and the people who had wealth or power or in some way were part of those who ran the society. And he brought with him often an ex-slave, somebody who had been somehow released or able to get to England and who was well spoken, who described what it was like, the Middle Passage, to be chained in the hold of a ship with hundreds of others and no food, what it was like to be whipped and beaten. And here in the nice parlors of the English gentry, and Thomas Clarkson went from place to place to place. 30 years it took him. And at the end of it, it wasn't just him, of course, it was a movement from the Quakers and others. The English Parliament came together, and with the force of their movement, they outlawed slavery. They probably did it in some stages, as I remember, to be accurate. First, no more taking of slaves, then no more keeping of slaves. I'm telling you this because it takes a while, especially in huge social change time. But you are the imaginal cells. You're the ones who are called to hold the vision of a wise society where people respect each other, where we care for the vulnerable, where we understand the universal teachings: hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is you. Let's see if anyone wants to come on screen and bring up a response or a question before we go on. Jillian, can we do that?
Absolutely.
You can raise your little screen hand if you want to respond with how it is for you or ask a question or dialogue. Let's see what happens.
Hello, Jack.
Hi, Ernie.
I wanted to share with everybody that on Saturday in the city of Berkeley, where I live, there was a large demonstration at the Tesla store down in southwest Berkeley. There were maybe 600 or 800 people there, and there was anger. People would drive by in Teslas and they would say, sell that car, sell that car. But what I wanted to share is the mood was joy. People were just, all the old lefties from Berkeley were coming out there, and it was just so happy to be with these other, I couldn't count, 600, 800 people like that. But the mood was of joy, of happiness. Here's the sign I was carrying.
So you had a good time.
It was a good time. We stopped traffic, blocked the whole street after a while. Somebody built a cardboard Tesla about 8 feet wide, 8 feet long, carried on sticks, covered with aluminum paint,
Yeah.
paraded back and forth among the people. It was a joyful occasion. I just wanted to reassure you about that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the spirit of it, that it was done, that it's not done out of great fear or great anger. Now, I need to be honest. I bought one of the first Teslas and I still drive it. People want to give me the bumper sticker. I bought this before Elon turned into whatever. Um, I really appreciate the concern about Tesla, but more deeply, it's the concern about what's happening in our government and what the kind of things that the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, is doing. I was talking to one of my dearest friends who worked for the World Health Organization. And he said, "Do you know what it's like to hold children who haven't had enough to eat?" Because he worked in the refugee camps. He said, "That's what I'm worried about." So thank you both for the joy, Ernie. And also, somehow, it's funny for you to say the old lefties were having a good time. They've got a cause now. May it work, but it's not just them, it's our children. The thing that happened in Truckee had families and kids, and it was also joyful. Yeah. If we're going to change the world, let's do it out of love, out of joy. Next person, please. We'll do another.
I'm an AIDS researcher, and I've worked for 4 decades with very vulnerable populations, women at risk for HIV in Africa, and sexual and gender minority people. And my group, we're heartbroken to see these vulnerable populations come under attack. And we're trying to find a way to make some noise and make the cuts that have been made in PEPFAR and other USAID programs palpable for people in America. And it's been very hard, and a lot of our international collaborators who could give us the data to show the impact are afraid. They feel so vulnerable. They're afraid to participate, which is even more heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, of course, we're old friends. I'm glad to see you. I know as a physician that you've given your life to this work of bringing medicine that saves people, that keeps families and mothers and children from dying across many parts of the world, and that your whole team and all the things you do now feels like it's being taken apart, undermined. So that's the tragic part. And I think your willingness to name it as part of our community asks us all to carry it with you so that you're not alone. And I invite you to look at all the little squares if you shift your computer so that people can gaze at you and look back and say, in their own way, with their eyes, and we're with you. We hear you. We want to help. So look at that. So you feel that that's there. And then also know, as you say, you're doing everything you can to make the changes, that it isn't the end of the story, that we go through a lot of cycles, and this is a destructive one. And it may have some tremendous suffering in parts. It may also have lessons we don't even know. It's so mysterious, It really is. And what light can you carry? What spirit can you carry? What helps you? What's the most helpful thing now that you're carrying your lamp in the darkness?
Well, I think I take a lot of solace in the feelings of solidarity that people are coming from all different backgrounds. There's a stand up for science movement. There's, other people who can feel the pain of the impact of these destructive acts.
So community is really central. The solidarity, all those people who gaze back at you with their eyes of compassion and also care and respect for all this beautiful work that you've done. And you are one of the imaginal cells, kind of remembering, okay, we can do this. We can have things fall apart, and we will respond, and we'll envision, and somehow we'll rebuild something. But for right now, it's also very difficult. There's no question about it for the kind of things you're talking about. I think about Vedran, and I carry his picture some. Vedran Smalovic, who is the cellist of Sarajevo. Here he's playing in the bombed out National Library of Sarajevo. And for the 3 years that Sarajevo was under siege, mortar fire, people couldn't get in and out except for UN helicopters. It was a really terrible time. And Vedran, who'd been in the symphony, would put on his tux and take his little folding chair. And wherever there'd been a mortar fire or a bombed out building, he would go in the day that followed it and seat himself in the middle of the crater and play beautiful music so the people of Sarajevo wouldn't give up hope. That's what's asked of us too, to kind of bring our music even in difficult times, to bring art and beauty and care and love more than anything else, even more than the fear and concern. Anyway, thank you for all your years of service. And I have just one terrible thing to say to you, kiddo. You ain't done yet. And I trust you. You know, you knew how to do this. You've done it in really hard places. I know you have. You've gone to the ends of the earth. It's been hot. It's been terrible. People have been sick. You've been the doctor. You know how to do this. And you're not done yet. You have things to do.
No, I hope we can be effective.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Let's pause for a moment. The help that can come also comes in unexpected ways, you know, if we're open, if we show our own humanity. Sometimes it's surprising what appears and who joins us. And you have to trust this as well, you know, that it could happen. When I graduated from nursing school at age 40, I started to learn nursing at age 40. The only job I could get was at a Veterans Affairs hospital. The work was a challenge in every possible way. It didn't help that the veterans teased me relentlessly, asking over and over if I was married. I'm actually a lesbian. My growing discomfort with the question seemed only to egg them on. Meanwhile, caring for them required a great deal of physical intimacy. While changing a dressing or washing a severely ill patient, I often could tell it had been a long time since that body had been touched with kindness. Gradually, I came to love the crusty old vets and the stubborn guys in detox, many of whom were homeless. Their spirit and resilience in the face of tremendous adversity were a kind of miracle. Later, I worked on the psychiatric ward where patients could become aggressive and angry, argumentative. Sometimes I didn't feel safe there, especially after it occurred to me that all these troubled veterans were combat trained. Once, a large psychotic man approached me in a threatening manner, just as I was starting to worry. An equally large veteran with dementia quietly stepped between us. Several other vets seemed to appear out of nowhere, and they stood nearby in silence, and I felt safe. I've retired now, but I still volunteer on that ward twice a week. I feel like I'm visiting my family. And it is our family. Now, of course, you know, families are weird. And in most every other culture, when we refer to people, when people are referred to, the honorifics that refer to them are familial. You know, uncle and auntie. I remember it was, you know, Auntie Condoleezza, right? And Auntie Hillary. Yeah, Uncle Barack. We have wacky uncles too. Cousin Elon and, you know, some demented uncles even. We won't use their names. But they're our relatives because we're all family. In the end, we're woven into an inescapable garment of destiny, as Dr. King says. And we can't fix it or change it. We can't change the suffering. But we can bear witness to it with our tears and our hearts. And remember that we're even bigger than the suffering. And then we can reach out our hand, each of us in our own way, to mend the places that we can touch, to care for those in front of us or around us, or to join together in community with others who care. And that care changes people, you know. Just that alone begins to make a difference. It becomes a kind of a movement, the movement of caring. This is compassion. It's really simple. It's not easy. You look at the dialogues with the Dalai Lama and Tutu, and they both suffered as much as anybody. Their countries and all that's around them and all the responsibility and the loss of Tibet and the killings in South Africa, and they're right in the middle of it. And yet they bring this huge compassion of heart and joy. I say, why should I let my heart be taken over? Let me bring beauty into the world and compassion and love. And you can do that too. Therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, says Mary Oliver, our modern great poet. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular. And each body a line of courage and something precious to the earth. I think of Ajahn Chah's forest monastery when the fighter jets and bombers flew over for those years of the wars in Cambodia and Vietnam, and our province was on the border of Cambodia, and Laos. It was a deliberate island of peace. He said, I want people to remember what's possible and not to close their eyes or turn away, but to become a light. Make of yourself a light. So I thank you for tonight. Thank you for what you put in the chat. Thank you for your good hearts. Thank you for your profound caring and for the sense of community that we have. I invite you to unmute, to look at one another. Let's be quiet for a moment before you speak and do a little metta, wishing well for all these faces in the squares. You know, these are your sisters and brothers and uncles and aunties. They are. Yeah. And offer each one a blessing from your heart. Courage, support. We're in this together. And then maybe we can unmute everybody and you can speak a few words of thanks or blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Everyone,
Namaste.
peace and
Namaste.
witnessing.
Thank you.
Brothers and
Jack.
cousins.
Gratitude
well.
to all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Namaste.
Thanks,
Thank
Jack.
you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Many blessings to all.
Take care. Good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
You all be well, safe.
Thank you.
I need to get out of here.
Thank you, Jack, for